I got some more Hackintosh for you guys. So if you've been following my videos, and I know it's been a while since I posted, but if you have, you'll notice I have a new computer now. It's not a new computer. It's a used computer that was I purchased basically from a friend because my old one went bad. My Inspiron 518 basically broke down finally after a long run. So basically I replaced it with this machine. It's a Dell Optiplex 790, and just to run through the specs real quick, it's running a Intel Core i5 2400 at 3.1 gigahertz, so that's the Sandy Bridge generation. It's also packing 16 gigs of RAM at 1600 megahertz DDR3, and it has the same solid state drive that was in the old Dell Inspiron machine. And I was using the GeForce 210 while this was running High Sierra, and that worked perfectly for that operating system. But as of just like last week, I updated the system to macOS Mojave 10.14, and I was able to do so directly through the App Store. So I was able to do that without any sort of patching after the fact. It essentially worked flawlessly. Aside from the fact that the graphics card did not, it was too old. The GeForce 210 is too old to support the graphics acceleration required in macOS Mojave. So that's why I purchased this. The GeForce GT 1030. Now, I did a lot of research about this card. Sorry, this camera's not focusing. I did a lot of research about this card, and I was very wary to make sure I purchased the correct model, because based on a lot of reviews, Nvidia basically did some very shady downgrade of this card after they released it. So essentially, they initially released it with 2 gigs of GDDR5 memory, video memory, and for some reason, after the fact, they started releasing models with DDR4 memory, which essentially crippled this entry-level gaming graphics card by 65% in terms of bandwidth. So I was very careful to make sure I got the model with GDDR5 memory. So before you guys tell me that this is a ripoff, I was careful to get the proper model. So at any rate, I'm running macOS 10.14 Mojave, and you can see right here, 10.14, 3.1 gigahertz Intel Core i5, 16 gigs of 16 megahertz DDR3, and I'm rocking a Nvidia GeForce GT 1030. Now, this card did not actually work out of the box, and that's because native drivers do not support this card. So I have to use the web drivers, and unfortunately, the web drivers for Mojave have not been released yet. So I had to do some tinkering around and a lot of troubleshooting to essentially get those drivers to work, because those drivers would not run on this system because they recognize that it's not macOS High Sierra, but a different operating system. So immediately when the web drivers recognize they're not on a compatible system, they prevent themselves from turning on. So I had to go in and change some configuration in the back end to basically trick the software to think that this is a compatible version of the OS. And after that, and doing some other stuff, like installing some additional patches on my Clover configuration, as well as clearing some of my text caches, I was able to get the system to recognize my card and my dual displays are working, which they weren't before I was able to get these drivers up. So just proof of concept that you can get this to work. Unfortunately, there are some caveats to this. The drivers are definitely not working perfectly. For example, if I open up a stack here, you can see the animation is very not smooth at all. And I think this has to do with the fact that perhaps I did not perfectly configure these drivers, and also the fact that the latest Nvidia web drivers for Mojave have not been released yet. You can also notice some artifacting in the Safari tabs. You can see how it's not displaying properly. But otherwise, it seems to be working just fine. I'm not having any sort of graphical glitches if I'm watching like online videos or anything like that. But it's still not perfect. So I'm hoping that Nvidia releases the web drivers for this OS soon, and that will rectify this situation. But it could also be, and maybe I'll ask you guys for advice on this. I don't know if this is for certain a 100% compatible card as far as when it comes to being compatible with macOS Mojave. So let me know your guys' thoughts, because if you guys say that this isn't really an ideal card for this type of system, then I may have to go and swap it out for something else. But it seems to be working just fine, at least for my purposes. But yeah, and if you guys want a video on how to do that type of configuration, because otherwise, if you don't get any sort of drivers loaded, you won't be able to get graphics acceleration at all, and you won't be able to support multiple monitors. I can make a video on that. But yeah, I'm not going to do like a full tour of the system, but just to tell you, it runs basically perfectly. Sleep wake works fine. Restart shutdown works fine. The only thing is that boot up times are, I would say, relatively slow for a system running off of a solid state drive. So I don't know if you guys have any tips and tricks on how to improve boot times when it comes to macOS 10, macOS Sierra, or not Sierra, sorry, Mojave now. If you guys have any sort of tips on how to do that, I would appreciate that. But otherwise, this system is running flawlessly. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys.